So that's why we focused on it. And for those of you who like a quick geeky moment about how we did this analysis, I'm going to give you a very short geeky moment for those of you who are interested on how we came about doing this. So what we did, and when you go to datafication.com.au, you will see that a lot of the infographics are actually live infographics. They're connected directly to the Instagram API, and so the data is continually changing, and because it's live. We worked within the Instagram user agreement for the API, and what we did was we looked at all those images posted with geo-coordinates so that we could separate Instagram posts from Australia, from anywhere in the geography of Australia, and exclude all global posts. And that was around 3 million images that we extracted from the Australian market. And that 3 million goes back over 12 months. So it's a pretty reasonable sample size. It's not universal, and I don't pretend that it's as perfect as probably Instagram could share with you if they were willing to share it with you. Now, we, with UTS, built an analytics tool to do the following, to allow rectangle sample analysis, which I've got to say sounds faintly rude now that I'm reading it up on stage, but rectangle sample analysis is basically this. So what it does is allow us to go in and actually put a rectangle around whatever piece of geography, whatever piece of real estate we want in Australia, and analyze it. So suck out all the geocoded posts from that area, or certainly a goodly number of posts from that sample size, and analyze it and slice it and dice it and have a bit of fun with it. So if you're really interested in how we did it in more detail, click on About on the website, and you can have some geek heaven on how we did it. So first of all, let's cover off my favorite learnings from this. The website has a lot more stuff in it, but I've just chosen 3 for you today. Number 1 is that Aussie Instagrammers love Sundays. It's very clear that this tool is being used in people's leisure time, and the peak time for people using Instagram based on our sample is Sunday, and particularly Sunday around 5 o'clock. And that often will be sort of recording and sharing the very best moments of their weekend. But there is also a lot of activity during the week in Australia, and weekdays around 8 p.m. in the evening seem to be the peak. So very different usage to Twitter, because Twitter is being used a lot more in the workplace and during the day, whereas this is very much when you're out and about, you're with your mobile, and you're recording your non-work world. And so it is quite interesting looking at those peaks. There are about an average of 2.3 Instagram posts from the average user every week, a total of about 10 images per month for the average user, and those are the peak times. So that's number 1, because if you understand the context in which a platform is being used, you're in a much better position to communicate in a timely and relevant way. Number 2 insight are the significant city differences between the most liked and shared Instagram posts. And this was actually more pronounced than I ever expected, because different Australian cities are producing different mixes of content in terms of the images on Instagram. And what we did was we took those 3 million, we categorized them into these categories. Artistic posts, food, music, fashion, scenic, portraits, animals, groups, action, selfies, and then just plain old weird shit, which you can't even begin to categorize, and in fact, you don't really want to look at. So those are the categories, and this is the national top 5 on Instagram based on our sample. Number 1 was food, and coffee we've put as part of that. Coffee is a very strong part of Instagram. I don't think I want to ever see another heart put in the top of a flat white ever again, because it is a very dominant image, as I've seen. Then there's portraits, which are different to selfies, because somebody else has taken the shot, and I'll come to selfies in a moment. Artistic, which is generally very smarty pants, arty type stuff. Scenic shots, and then weird shit, uncategorizable weird shit. So that's the national average picture. Now let's look at the cities. Now, Oh, example of weird shit. Somebody asked me earlier, give me an example of weird shit. And ferret photography. And in fact, if you're into ferrets, there is ferretabulous. So if you go hashtag ferretabulous, you can see actually a lot of girls in bikinis with ferrets. And I don't know what that's all about, but there's also just a lot of ferret action happening on Instagram. So if you've got a product for ferrets, it's your heaven. So that's an example of the weird shit. Let's look at Melbourne and how Melbourne is different. So Melbourne absolutely lives the dream of the stereotypical view of Melbourne. It's about food, artistic stuff, and fashion. That is the dominant content mix. It's a bang on exactly what you would expect. Now, Sydney is different. Sydney is very different. And as a Sydney-sider, it doesn't surprise me that the random shit, the weird stuff, is number one. It's actually very hard to categorize. Then portraits of people, then artistic, then food, then selfies. And Brisbane, we go back to food, portraits, artistic, selfie, and action shots make a sort of a rating there on Brisbane. But what interested me is these are what are liked and shared most, as opposed to what represents total volume across Australian posts on Instagram. But I was really interested in this selfie thing, because all these shots I keep saying, there's so many bloody selfies. Now, for those of you who don't know what a selfie is, it's typically somebody under the age of 25 taking a shot of themselves, usually in the mirror. And it is a curious phenomena, but it is, we've discovered, a very fast-growing phenomena. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to actually work out who is the selfie capital of Australia? Who, of all the cities in Australia, is producing the greatest volume, as opposed to the most liked, the greatest volume of selfies? And I'm pleased to share with you the answer today. And on average, about 15% nationally is the average number of selfies from the total volume nationally of Instagram posts, according to our sample. So 15% versus Gold Coast, Brisbane, and Sydney, they are pressing way above average in terms of their love of selfies. And it would appear that Perth and Hobart barely know what a selfie is. So maybe it's a force that's moving slowly down the East Coast, I don't know. But that's the selfie side of the thing. And it's sort of interesting, because I think a lot of people just assume that selfies are about narcissism, that selfies are just about the me culture. And actually, I think it's more than that. It's significantly more than that, because at the extreme, a selfie, you have a girl saying, "Am I hot?" and you've got a boy saying, "Are my abs ripped?" and sharing that. And what they're doing is they're actually benchmarking themselves against complete strangers. They're actually gamifying their bodies. And what they're doing by gamifying their bodies is saying to people, rate me, rank me, tell me, in this competition, how do I do better? Am I doing better than other people? So people are gamifying their bodies on this thing, and particularly in Brisbane, Sydney, and Melbourne. And that says something about people under 25 and their desire to almost compete in terms of how they look. And that is an interesting phenomenon, and I think as a sort of social insight, it is a little bit scary and a little bit interesting, and particularly if you're marketing in Sydney, Brisbane, and Gold Coast. If you can tap into that in some way, that's a pretty clever thing to do. So that's the world of selfies. Then, number 3 area that I thought was interesting to share with you today are the top brands on Instagram. And when we started on this, we thought, top brands, that's really easy to do. We'll just go in, check all the top advertisers, and we will basically look how many followers they've got, how many shots they're posting, and rank them accordingly. And we went, you know what? That's a really shit way to do it, because you can manipulate that, and it's not true. So what we decided to do was analyze this with the Instagram equivalent of spontaneous awareness. And spontaneous awareness in this world is hashtag your brand name. And if you can persuade consumers and Instagrammers to use your hashtag, you actually have achieved a lot more than just building followers, because you are entering a much bigger conversation. And as you know, hashtags are a critical part of success on Instagram. And if you look at the behavior of 19-year-old boys, they will take a shot and they will put 40 or 50 hashtags against their image. And so the objective on Instagram for your brand should actually for people to either spontaneously or upon a prompt be hashtagging your brand name. So we thought, well, let's analyze it that way. And this is the list of the top brands in Australia based on that criteria. And what's really interesting about this is some of them are there functionally. So for example, hashtag Canon, people have a big habit of when they take a shot with a particular Canon lens or a particular Canon camera, they will hashtag the name of that. So that's why Canon have got there in a sort of functional way. The sad thing is, if you look at the overall list of hashtags in Australia, and we have a live feed of that on Instagram, on datafication.com.au, you will see that the current #1 overall non-brand hashtag is about 1.6 million uses in our sample. And for example, McDonald's have only had 6,800 uses of hashtag McDonald's. And so the difference between those spontaneous, those memes and those discussions that are happening, the volume that's happening on Instagram versus branded ones is massive. And that, I think you can take as an indicator that brands haven't been taking this medium particularly seriously and haven't actually got their heads around it. So there is a woeful lack of significant hashtag brand activity. So maybe in many ways Australian marketers and agencies are failing to use this fast-growing medium in an interesting way.